So a little introduction. My bio is in the program, but just quickly, I think I'm here as a USM, so representing US Solidarity Economy Network, but my day job is I'm the co-director of Wellspring Cooperative. We're developing a network of worker-owned businesses in the greater Springfield area. Right now we have 9 co-ops in our network. Yeah, so that's my day job. Also, if there's anybody that I know and I should recognize, I apologize. I either put on my glasses and they get all fogged up and I can't see anything, but without my glasses, I can't really see see people well enough to recognize you. So don't think I'm being rude. I just can't see. So all right. Um, yeah, let's get into it then. Yeah, let's just do a little bit of welcome. Thank you so much for coming, as well as the folks who are online. And just a little bit of grounding to get us all just settled in after probably a beautiful lunch. So just one breath together. Um, Actually, let me just I'll move it a little closer just so I can see what it is. Okay, so just to ground us in our bodies. One breath to open our minds. And one breath to open your hearts. Just some agreed like shared values. So first, just participate. There will be participation. Some is participation, but there will be participation. So participate fully as if your liberation is at stake, which it is. Everyone is a teacher and everyone is a learner. So we're very much embedded in popular education approach and philosophy. Practice self-care and community care. If you need to step out, whatever, feel free. And also go with the flow and expect non-closure. Big topic, right? We're talking about total system change, right? So we're not going to wrap it all up in an hour and a half. So we will be doing some small group breakouts. So in your small groups, please do say your name and pronouns before speaking. One mic, speak one at a time. Loving speech, so please to practice compassion, curiosity. Pause before speaking. Try to equalize power relationships. Balance good listening with sharing openly. And if this is for Zoom, so never mind that. We're all, I guess for the Zoom people, right? Yeah, you could always leave the breakout. Oh gosh, I hadn't. We'll have to put that together.
Okay. Yeah, we'll figure it out.
All right. Okay. All right. Next.
That's that.
All right. So why are we talking about solidarity economy? Is it necessary to have fundamental system change in order to have regenerative agriculture? And probably a lot of other things that you all care about beyond just regenerative agriculture. So I want to just say this is a particular moment in history. It's a very historic moment where there's a convergence of all these crises, right? It comes around once in a generation, maybe once in every 2 generations. So clearly there's a pandemic. There's all the impacts of climate change. There's all the racial justice uprisings. There's our slide towards fascism, or some would say we're not sliding, we're already halfway there. Anyway, there are other crises we could talk about, but these are some of them. They're converging, right? And it's very scary times. Clearly, it's scary times. I think next. Oh, never mind. You can go back. So it is scary times, but the silver lining is that crises also create opportunity and openings, right? People's faith in the status quo, for many people, it's been shattered. It is fractured, and there's an opportunity to introduce whole new paradigms, whole new ways of being, whole new ways of organizing our society and our economy. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So in order to understand system change, so just a little bit more about me. I'm an economist by training. I was the director of the Center for Popular Economics for almost 10 years, and I've been a member of the collective for 30 some years. So I'm definitely, a lot of this is drawing on the work that we as progressive to radical economists have been doing to help people understand how the economy works. And so it's important to understand the basics of capitalism if we agree that we want to move and need to move beyond capitalism. So I'm going to sort of start with capitalism. Okay. So this is an interactive exercise. If you can take out your phones, and I don't know if it works. Like, I don't know if you can use a QR code on the screen.
You can actually.
And if you don't know, if you don't want to do that, you can just type in your internet search menti.com, and it'll take you to a page where it asks you for a code, and that's the code 6655. And the question, once you get there, is, what does capitalism mean to you? So we're going to crowdsource some reactions. You can make, I believe, as many responses as you want.
Did I open this?
Yeah, go ahead and do that.
I'm gonna.
If everybody's got the QR code, the number code will stay. It's at the very top of the next slide. Oh, no, it didn't show. Anyway, it's fine. Is this?
This is the link that I just loaded.
It was, yeah, 6655.
There's
8948.
Yeah, 66558948. So
Hold on a second. So is everybody there either got the QR code or you got into menti.com? Can we go to the next slide? So you'll see this populating in real time, hopefully. It didn't look like it was actively. Oh.
Go to the next one.
No, try
go to that.
again.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see if it populates in real time. Okay. So that's funny. There's more than last time, but I'm not seeing. Are people still entering?
It says it's got 26 users on it.
Yeah, usually you're seeing, so I don't know why that is, but anyway. So I'm sorry, usually it's lots of fun because you'll see it populating and things moving around and some of these words getting bigger. But suffice it to say, like, the bigger the word, the more times it's been mentioned. So clearly, exploitation, oppression, power, consumption, greed, money. Yeah, hopefully you can read it. Can you see it?
I'm gonna screen share that so people can see the word cloud.
Okay. Hopefully you saw enough of that word cloud, or you can look at it now. Keep that in your mind, right? A lot of these are describing the impact of capitalism, which is exactly what the question was. So fair enough. Some of these are kind of getting at what it is, a definition. So we can go to the next one.
Back to your PowerPoint.
Yeah. So I think I have heard in the many years that I've done popular economics, helping people understand how the economy works or doesn't work, I've heard lots of people say capitalism, it's just too complicated. It's just, there's too many different opinions about what it is. It's impossible to define. Therefore, especially on the left, we throw up our hands, say it's impossible to define. Capitalism becomes a catch-all for those of us on the left anyway, for all the bad things, right? And then it's kind of not so useful if you don't have some clarity about what is capitalism versus what is any other system. So this definition of capitalism, these 5 characteristics, we've been using at the Center for Popular Economics in our trainings and our summer institutes for well over 40 years. and it's pretty much stood the test of time. This is a down and dirty definition of capitalism. Okay, 5 characteristics. You need them all. One alone will not do it. So first of all, private ownership of the means of production. Sometimes we call those the MOPs. What are the MOPs? The MOPs are the things that you need to produce stuff, right? Goods or services. So it's land, it's factory, it's your tools, it's your machinery, it's your input. Okay, so the MOPs is the stuff you need to produce your product or service. Okay. Private ownership means that it's the capitalists that own and control the MOPs, right? So there you have capitalists. The second bullet point is capitalism uses wage labor. Okay. Those are your workers. The workers do not own the means of production. They do not own, they do not control. They can fight for a bigger share of the pie, maybe a little bit more voice. They can unionize, etc. There's a struggle. But at the end of the day, they do not own the means of production, and therefore legally they do not have that control. It's the capitalists that have that control. So right there, those 2 bullet points, and that's that fundamental structure that defines, at least partly defines capitalism, means that you have class struggle. Inevitably, inherently, intrinsically, you have class struggle. Not to say that there aren't very enlightened capitalists that treat their workers well, and it's very consultative, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But as a system, there's going to be this class struggle, right? There can be exceptions, but okay. So we have those first 2, and the one of the reasons why there's inevitable class struggle is that the capitalists are also often, very often, not universally, but very often, trying to maximize profits. That third bullet point, on the backs of the workers. They're trying to lower wage or worsen working conditions or cut benefits, whatever, right? So clearly that adds to that intrinsic class struggle. Commodity production means that things are produced for sale and not necessarily for use. Therefore, many things in capitalism are produced because they make a lot of profits, and things that we really need sometimes are not produced because they're not very profitable. So think about, for example, affordable housing. There's a shortage of affordable housing because it's not very profitable. Luxury kind of housing is much more profitable, just as an example. And the last thing is market exchange. So this is all mediated through the market, right? You supply and demand and prices, and it's all pretty impersonal, right? So those 5 characteristics, you need them all. And the reason I think this is important is I have heard people in a worker cooperative say, oh yeah, we're a capitalist business. And I'm like, no, you're not, because what you don't have, as should be clear, hopefully, you don't have that divide. You don't have the capitalist and the wage laborer. The workers are the owners. So you don't have that divide, right? Yes, they might, they engage in commodity production and their goods and services are sold on the market, but they don't have those first 2. Okay. So that's one reason why it's really important to know sort of these basic characteristics, and you need all 5. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is just a kind of down and dirty. I'm going to be talking about these 2 big buckets. One is capitalism, and the other one is post-capitalism. So not capitalism, maybe coming after capitalism. Okay, so under capitalism, there are many different models, right? So here are 3. One is neoliberalism. That's what we're living in now. Pretty cutthroat version of capitalism. If I had a kind of slogan, an Animal Farm slogan for neoliberalism, it would be markets good, state bad, right? So you might remember that Grover Norquist quote about what conservatives want to do is shrink the government till it could be drowned in a bathtub, right? So really shrink government, deregulate, privatize, undercut social programs, etc. Okay. And meanwhile, laissez-faire, free markets, although that is really, in fact, very hypocritical, right? Lots of market intervention when it suits those corporations. So that's neoliberalism, pretty cutthroat. New Deal capitalism is what we would have seen coming out of the Great Depression and then the following years, right? Like FDR's New Deal, right? So it's legitimizing the role of government. It's expanding the social safety net. The government has a role to play in also smoothing out the ups and downs of the economy. Okay. The New Deal, well, I'll leave it there for now. Social democracy, think Scandinavia. It's kind of like the New Deal on steroids, right? Much more government intervention, much more publicly owned, this and that, much more generous social welfare programs. Okay, so I'll go into solidarity economy much more in depth, but right now on this slide, I just want to point out that solidarity economy absolutely embraces democratic forms of socialism, as well as other forms of approaches to solidarity economy that don't even have an ism, right? They don't even have a name. And that's all stuff that we embrace as part of under the big tent of solidarity economy. What we're really clear about is that we do not embrace authoritarian systems of state socialism or any other system. Okay. So when people throw, like this criticism, oh, well, what you're trying to do is whatever, Soviet Union or whatever. Yeah. Uh, that's not a model. Elements, yes, we applaud, but that centralized authoritarianism, we reject. Okay, next one. Yeah, so I already did this: neoliberalism, New Deal, social democracy. Oh, we could let's leave out Bernie for now. Bernie really talks about like a Scandinavian model, right? Which there's some debate. I personally don't consider that socialism. It's still capitalism because those economies in Scandinavia are still dominated by the big capitalist corporations. But we can go on. Okay, why does it matter? A lack of clarity about what capitalism is can easily lead to reforming and thereby strengthening capitalism. So an example is the New Deal, right? So the FDR's New Deal was a time of tremendous turbulence. There was a lot of challenge to capitalism, right? The movement of socialists and communists was really strong. And in fact, the New Deal absolutely clearly and transparently stole a lot of the ideas from socialist platforms and then used it to really save capitalism. So if you don't keep that in mind, you're pretty likely to reinforce and strengthen capitalism. Right here, I want to say, if you're feeling like, oh, I don't know, I think we can get there, right, to that more just and sustainable world by reforming capitalism, I am not here to throw stones. I'm saying that's a position. There are lots of people that have that position. I'm just trying to make the point. It's good to have clarity. If that's really what you believe, sure, go ahead, right? Dig into that. But if you have some inkling that we need to move beyond capitalism, then it's important to know, well, what is capitalism, right? So clarity about what is your long-term vision? What is your vision of system change? What system change are you talking about? Reforming capitalism or moving beyond it, right? That ensures that when we enact change, creating new practices or policies, that they're transformative reforms and not feeding capitalism or saving capitalism. The Green New Deal is a good example. Seems good, right? Who doesn't want the Green New Deal to address climate change? But there are ways to do it that would support solidarity economy. And then there are ways that are going to just reinforce capitalism and strengthen those big corporations. Okay. Next one. Okay, so here's a little guided visualization, if you would indulge me. You can close your eyes. I'm gonna have to, I can read it. Okay, so close your eyes. Take a deep breath in. And imagine that your vision for a just and sustainable world has just come to pass. So breathe in deeply. What do you smell? What do you hear? Imagine that you're walking. What are you walking on? A sidewalk, a path. And what do you see as you're walking along? What do you see? Do you see buildings? Do you see cars, bicycles, parks, open space, farms? What do they look like? Who is using them? Do you see people? Who do you see? Do you know them? You arrive at your destination, whatever that is. And what have you come here to do? Work, visit, volunteer, shop, whatever that is. Sink into that for just a few seconds. Okay. I invite you to open your eyes, feel that other world, and we're going to go back to this word cloud. So next slide. It's the same one. So we'll have to go and advance the word cloud. So I think you have to go into the present again and advance it.
I'm gonna put it in the chat just for our folks that are there.
So go ahead. Hopefully you can get in. It should be the same link and start filling that in. Oh no, you won't be able to until we advance it.
Let's do that.
Okay. Okay. So hopefully you should see the question. What values underpin your vision of another world? What values underpin your vision of another world? And again, you can, the code.
It's menti.
Oh no, I got it. 66558948. Oh, so yeah, we have to go in the. I think we have to go here.
I'm in it.
Oh,
What values anchor this vision?
yeah. Huh. Try a refresh. Sorry.
No, it's right. I've actually never used it before.
Yeah. Wait.
All right.
66558948. Yeah, the QR code should work too. Did you get that? 66. Even if you refresh. All right. So forget the word cloud. Yeah, never know. And
People shout out somewhere.
yeah, just a few shout outs. Values, just popcorn style. Be bold. Connection. Rest. Regeneration. Regenerative. Yeah, what else? Keep them coming. What? Community. Purpose driven work. Creative expression. Unafraid. Passion. Great. Human. Couple more. Equality. Economic equality. One more? Who's going to get the last word? Oh, that's it. That's it. Okay. All right. Let's go back. So that's great. Usually with a word cloud, we get all this stuff. And what you'll see, because now I'm going to shift over into what is solidarity economy. Um, yeah. So what is solidarity economy? Which for those of us who believe that we're not going to get to that more just and sustainable world by reforming capitalism, this is a framework. It's grounded in solidarity economy values, which will look slightly different in different parts of the world. But in the US Solidarity Economy Network, we use these 5 values. And if we had that word cloud, and if you held it in your mind's eye, you would see that a lot of them, most of them would map somehow into these 5 values. So the first one is solidarity, right? Solidarity, cooperation, mutualism, reciprocity, etc. The second one is equity, equity in all dimensions, race, class, gender, ableism, LGBTQ, etc. Okay, equity in all dimensions. Democracy, so participatory democracy in politics, in your workplace, in your community. Okay. Sustainability, I don't think I have to explain that other than to say solidarity economy as a global movement has embraced the rights of Mother Earth. If that means anything to you, basically that ecosystems have standing, should have legal standing. And there have been interesting cases like in battling fracking where that has been upheld, like legal standing to maintain the integrity of an ecosystem. And pluralism, what do we mean by pluralism? It means it's not a one size fits all model, right? We believe there are many paths to the same goal of a just, a democratic, regenerative world, right? Many paths. And we're not about saying this is the one way. We're not about adhere to our line or we're going to kick you out of the party, right? Like it's a big tent and it's very humble. And we believe that let's try a lot of different things and see what works. Different things are going to work in different times and places and cultures, right? Let's not be rigid and judgmental about this kind of stuff. Let's not be so arrogant as to think that we have the answer. So to me, this is like really, really, really important part of this framework, coming into it from the get-go, being really clear about being humble. And at the same time, also just being very clear that this is a post-capitalist vision. Okay, all right, next. All right, so this definition draws on the US Solidarity Economy Network. It also draws on REPES. REPES is which it makes sense in Spanish and French, but not English. It's basically the International Solidarity Economy Network. The REPES went through a 2-year international participatory consultation process to at least get the basics, right? There's lots of variation in what is solidarity economy, but to come to agreement and build consensus around at the bare minimum, this is what we mean, so that it doesn't just become, again, mush, meaningly mush, because it's impossible to define. So number one, it's a framework. It's a framework that connects solidarity economy practices and the people, working with those practices. The practices and the people align with the values, which we already talked about. And all of this is to articulate and give birth to a post-capitalist world. And I say world rather than economy, because when we get into solidarity economy, we're really thinking about the economy in the original sense of the word, of the Greek terms, which meant management of the household. So management of our community, of our own household, community, local regions, countries, world, right? How do we manage all that, right, together? So it gets much broader than just thinking about the economy, the way it's narrowly normally defined. Okay, next one. So just to imagine solidarity economy in your life. So instead of capitalism, where we have solidarity economy, instead of a police state, we have transformative justice. Instead of dealing with corporate monopolies, there's community controlled businesses. Instead of a boss, maybe you're a worker owner, you own your own business together with other people. Instead of a landlord, maybe you live in a community land trust where you make collective decisions. Instead of a bank, maybe you use a credit union. Maybe many of you already bank at a credit union. Credit unions, by definition, are a form of a cooperative. Um, some of them aren't very good about letting people know that they are they are actually part owner of that credit union, but that's the way they're organized. Instead of representative democracy, we also have participatory or direct democracy, right? Uh, Instead of landlords, again, maybe we have tenant unions. Next. So I'm not going to go in great depth. I'm happy to share these slides so you can look at all these examples at your leisure. But these are economic sectors, like this is the way an economist's brain works. These are economic sectors, and you can see some examples of solidarity economy practices that exist in all of these sectors, right? And it's not exhaustive. There are other examples, but there are a couple that I want to pull out. One is under production, reproduction, the last thing, unpaid care work, right? So solidarity economy absolutely embraces as valuable economic activity the care work that we almost all engage in, or I would say all engage in, whether it's siblings, caring for your siblings, or parents, or children, or neighbors, or friends, or you volunteer in your community, right? These are all kinds of care work that without which, imagine, right, the world would not keep on ticking around, right, ticking forward, right, without that care work. And just because it's not waged, just because you're not getting paid for it, doesn't make it any less valuable. And if it was paid for, right, think of elder care or child care, right, think how expensive that is. But we absolutely embrace that as valuable economic activity that should be recognized and supported. The other thing that I want to pull out here is under governance, the the state or the public sector, and there might be some people of anarchist persuasions that might just completely reject this, but I would say it, most of us in the solidarity economy world recognize that the state is not going away anytime soon, and it's pretty likely that even once we get there, if we ever get there, some of these are keepers. For example, public education, public libraries, etc. Right? So there are the point here is that some of these practices are very mainstream. They're around us, right? The public sector. And some of them are maybe a little bit more alternative, maybe community land trust. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. Look it up. Might seem, relatively recent innovation and an alternative. Although all of these things build on for the most part, old practices, often ancient practices that existed for millennia across every culture, right? The human race would not be here, absolutely, would not have survived without really using a lot of these kind of cooperative, solidaristic practices, right? So solidarity economy is all these sectors Some of them are very old. Some of them are kind of new innovations. Some of them are alternative, and some of them are mainstream. So there's this huge, huge foundation upon which to build. We are not starting from scratch. But let's see, next one. Okay. Um, I'll finish that thought in a second with the next slide. But so this is just to wrap up. YSE, as opposed, there's a million words. There's community economies, there's donut economies, there's you name it. There's a gazillion terms. I'm going to make a case for solidarity economy because it's a world in which many worlds fit. That's what we would like to see in the words of the Zapatista. The pluralism keeps us humble and non-dogmatic. It's grounded in actual lived experience to see what works. It's a big tent. Overlaps with a lot of these other approaches and paradigms, but it's not necessarily always the same. It's clearly defined in terms of what system are we talking about. We're really clear about being post-capitalist. And it's a growing global movement. Oh, you know what? Can we go back to the definition? So I went through most of the definition and I think, no, keep going. One more. Yeah. So what I didn't talk about is the global movement. So I mentioned RIPES already. It's a network of networks that's present on all continents of the world except for Antarctica, and we'll get there eventually. The International Labor Organization runs an annual Solidarity Economy Academy. The United Nations has a task force on the solidarity economy. It has been enshrined in 2 constitutions in Bolivia and Ecuador, and there are a number of countries, might be maybe 8 countries that have national policy frameworks mandating departments to support solidarity economy practices. So there's a lot of there's a lot of legs there. Okay, let's go back to, yeah. Okay, we're good with that. So this metaphor is something that I want to leave you with before we break into small groups. So when a caterpillar spins its chrysalis, its body starts to break down into this nutrient-rich goop. And within that goop are these imaginal cells. And these imaginal cells have a different vision of what it could be. And it's so different that what's left of the caterpillar's immune system starts to attack the imaginal cells. But some of them survive, and they start to recognize their common cause and their common vision. And they start to come together, these imaginal cells. They start to form clumps, and then the clumps start to form bigger clumps. And as they come together, they start to specialize. So some of them become an eye, and some become an antenna, and some become the body, and some become the wing, until it emerges as a whole new creature, right? Transformed into a butterfly. Okay, true story. So the reason why it's a nice metaphor for the solidarity economy is if you think back to that previous slide with all those examples, it's as if those are imaginal cells. They could be the foundation for really building a very different world. But right now, those imaginal cells are they're sundered from each other. They're not connected. They're not pulling in the same direction. What the solidarity economy does as a framework is to provide some of that skeletal tissue to bring these practices together. And so that we can really start articulating a whole system, right? An alternative system to capitalism that centers those values. Okay. So that's it. I think, let's see, the next thing that I wanted to do. All right. So we're going to do this exercise. For the online folks, well, let me set these guys up first. If you maybe want to just set up a couple rooms. I don't know how many people we have. Okay. All right. So round Roundabout, how many people do we have?
40.
40 here?
Yep.
In this room? Okay, what's 40 divided by 6 is about 6. That's fine. Okay, can we count off by, I have 6 sets of what we call stepping stone cards. So these are examples of solidarity economy practices for the most part. Some of them are sort of movement things. There's a couple in here that are they're actually not solidarity economy necessarily, right? They're just cool things. But they could easily be, because a lot of what's going to make something a solidarity economy practice or not is not whether it's really regenerative or not. Like that's part of it. But if it's not sort of collectively, democratically owned and managed, then yeah, it's not quite solidarity economy. And so some of them are examples like that, like an interesting technique or something. Okay, can we count off by 6, starting in the back? Okay, folks, I hope that was fun. I hope you had a good conversation. I hope you chose your favorite bar and also maybe a person to report back. And because of the recording and because of the folks on Zoom, whoever's doing the report back needs to come down here. I know, scary. So let's start. Maybe let's just start with this group here. Tell us what your favorite card was. You'll need to summarize it. Like this card is talking about this and why. Who's your presenter? Right. Great card. So I think you need to be
Right there is fine. Yeah, it's an area mic, so you're good.
Farm hack?
I would agree if you can summarize it, that'd be great.
Oh, sure. So a farm hack, as we understand it, is kind of a community farm model where people are invited to have access to some land and to the tools to have that land and open conversation to discuss farming matters. So we really liked the kind of open source part of it and resource sharing aspect to it, and almost like in community having conversations and education about certain things. So yeah.
What was it called again?
Farm hack.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hey.
Note, you all can have the link to the whole slide deck and it has all cards. So you can check it out. Yeah. Okay, how about that group back there? Come on down.
All right. We chose the compost co-op, which is actually a partnership as it ends up between 2 different co-ops. So the compost co-op itself is located in Franklin County, Massachusetts, and it provides opportunities and ownership for people coming out of jail and prison. And because this co-op recognized that one of the biggest barriers to societal reentry is housing, they actually purchased housing for the owner workers of the co-op, and they're rehabbing it through a partnership with another worker-owned co-op. So very cool all around and very local, which is why it appealed to us, very attainable.
In Greenfield. Thank you. How about we go over to that group? Oh, good. You're going to do a duet. Good. Oh, you could choose from two. Okay. You couldn't choose between them. Fair enough.
Okay, we had the Paddle People of Northampton, Compost Co-op, and participatory budgeting in Miyawaki Forest. We kind of were split between Miyawaki Forest and participatory budgeting because they're more like foundational systems to fixing the problems versus the Compost Co-op and Paddle People. You still need manpower and you still need, those resources to continue versus Milwaukee Forest was kind of self-sustaining after 3 to 4 years. So we were kind of saying like, even if climate change wipes us out, these oh, people didn't have that, by the way. It's kind of an approach to create ecosystems very quickly with a lot of diversity. You'll have like a really mature ecosystem in 20 years. And it's like a very small space. You have a lot of different things going on. So yeah, basically those spaces would create ecosystems for other animals or other complex organisms, even if we weren't here. So that was kind of why we picked that one.
And we found we were 50-50 on both, and participatory budgeting we found was a really important kind of like innovative idea, just because it pushes people to really enact democracy and direct democracy and coming together and making decisions about what their budgets are going to be in towns. And they have some examples of even in New York City where 100,000 people are making decisions about a $40 million budget. And so we found that that was the most innovative, but also the most challenging. But kind of
like something that we felt like would be maybe have the most impact because of the way that it forces people to come together and work together and engage in a way that all these other things maybe could happen through the budgeting process.
Great, thank you so much. That Milwaukee Forest is an example of something that could be done in a solidarity economy way, kind of collectively and
Democratically managed.
or certainly one person could go and do it by themselves. So it's not necessarily, it depends how it would be done.
How about you guys?
Okay, so we were inspired by two of the cards that you gave us. The first one was the what's called Freedom Farm Cooperative, which is located in, doesn't say what state it's located in, Ruralville. Where is it? Do you know where it is?
I think it's Alabama.
In Alabama. And so the Freedom Farm Cooperative was started by a woman named Fannie Lou Hamer, who is a former sharecropper and civil rights activist. And she essentially started a cooperative farm on 40 acres, and it grew to 640 acres. It also had affordable housing units for 200 families. And in its heyday, it was the largest employer in Sunflower County. And so we thought this was a good example of a worker-owned farm cooperative. And my understanding is that this was one of the first community land trust kind of models in the country. So we were very inspired by this. And then the second one is the community pool resource management model, which is where there's local control of natural resources, which ensures economic and environmental sustainability. And this card created this conversation in our group where we talked about this idea of natural resources maybe being given rights. Like there's this concept being floated around in Massachusetts for the Charles River to have personhood, which means that we could sue the government if like the Charles River was being exploited, because it would be considered a person. So yeah, we thought that these two kind of could work hand in hand together, and we're inspired by them.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, actually, I will collect all those sets at the end. But how about you guys next? Oh.
So all of them very compelling. The one that we chose to pull out is the Western Mass Worker Co-ops. Just because as a model, the worker cooperative seems like it could have its hands, like most people's hands in it, and also be a tool for shifting collective culture and values and norms so that some of these other orgs and groups wouldn't necessarily need to exist in the way that they do, because that would just be how society operates. So yeah, the model of work with cooperatives being a way to engage a ton of people in transformative work was something that stood out to us.
Thank you. So how about that group? And while you're coming down, I just want to say that Western Mass and the Connecticut River Valley in particular, we haven't quite run the numbers, but I suspect that it's one of the most worker co-op dense regions in the entire country.
Wow.
If you look at that card and you see all the co-ops, we're extraordinarily co-op rich. Almost all of those co-ops are in the Upper Valley, so above the sometimes affectionately called the tofu curtain, right? So that's the five college area, right? Clearly a different demographic, more affluent, more white, more well-educated folk. Bless those co-ops. We love them. We work with them. We know them. But Wellspring's mission was to say, okay, if co-ops are all that important and all that great, they also need to work in those communities that are really, as they say, at the forefront of struggle. That's why we work in Springfield and Holyoke and those kind of communities. Not to say that people aren't struggling above the tofu curtain, but in terms of where the concentrations of poverty, of all those things. It's the lower valley. So that's something to center always in solidarity economy, that equity piece. And if we're only growing it in affluent communities, we're not doing it, right? Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Our group chose the Little Free Pantries as kind of, if you've seen Little Free Libraries before, they're small food pantries where people can donate excess food that they have, and people who are in need in the community can just readily take that food. And we liked it because it demonstrates the solidarity instead of charity, where there's not just contributors to it and there's not just takers from it, but you could be a contributor to it and then you could take from it when you need it. And it's also distributed to people like throughout the community. So there's not just a central hub that everyone can access it. It's centered in the places that people need it the most. And it's an accessible step forward. It doesn't take an incredible amount of resource input in order to do. And so it's a good example of like a good first step.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, so we are,
Well, I think we have a
Oh, sorry.
that online that might want to
Good.
share.
Thank
We
you.
got
Thank you.
a
Thank
minute?
you. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Ellen, did you want to come on?
Sure. So because we couldn't see the cards, at first, we had a very interesting conversation and we shared a little bit about ourselves. And one of us is involved in revamping Grange movements. I helped to create a mutual aid group, and another person is getting together with another family and like sharing resources that way. So, mutual aid on sort of a lot of levels. And so we kind of chose that. And I probably dominated way too much, but we discussed some of the issues we had in our group here in Needham, and the idea of bringing mutual aid to a community that suffers from excessive wealth, and that there are those of us who are dealing with impoverishment, and working on a regional level, and what happens in trying to understand mutual aid. And some people are very wedded to charity economies, volunteerism versus mutual aid. And yet we have to make space for both. And we also work with a wide ranging sliding fee scale. So how do we, that would be sort of our next steps. How are we introducing those concepts? And so once again, inspired by mutual aid, and how do, as much as I think these things need to go to suburbia. We need to be transforming suburbia as well as other spaces, because that is what's controlling a lot of the craziness, in the current capitalist state. And I think once we can infiltrate these ideas into suburbia, and so that they're normal, so that every business is offering sliding fee scale, even a store could offer sliding fee scale. So that is how I think we can infiltrate it on a really light touch way. Because I don't see the revolution starting in Needham, that's for damn sure.
Thanks, Ellen.
Is there another one?
No,
Or they
no,
were the only
no one
one
else. Sorry.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I think thank you very much for all your participation, your good thoughts. We're out of time. I know I could tell that there were probably lots of questions about, well, what about this and what about that? And so believe me, it gets very gray. Like, what are the boundaries of solidarity economy? I was saying to Marty that there was a group of us that got a grant to do some mapping. And so then we really had to get granular about what are we including in our survey and what are we not. We probably spent 50 hours, like four of us spent probably 50 hours together hashing through like practice by practice. And so it gets really gnarly and there's lots of gray areas and it's like we don't have enough information. So there are some things that are pretty clear. There are other things like fair trade, for example, right? Walmart has its own brand of fair trade, right? So like, yeah, fair trade is great, but how is it? Yeah, anyway. So that was one. The other thing maybe that arose out of a conversation that we had was just to say, and I get this a lot in these kind of teach-ins, how do you talk to people about this? And do you always have to be leading with being post-capitalist? And no, I mean, people, your audience the best. You don't even have to say solidarity economy, although it's helpful, right, to create that recognition as we grow it. But, we're constantly code switching, right, depending on the audience, right? So don't feel like you necessarily have to wave a post-capitalist flag. I certainly don't until I feel like there's enough time to talk about that and that there's some receptiveness. But you lead wherever is going to open the conversation. That's a stopper for some people, like scratching their head about that, worrying about that. So, okay. I think we're good. We're done. Thank you so much for coming.